Michael Bloomberg gave us all a wild ride, didn't he? I mean, he shows up out of nowhere. He's not even on the ballots of the first few states, or part of the first Democratic debates. And yet for a short while there, it was Bloomberg, Bloomberg, Bloomberg everywhere. I guess he was banking on the fact that he and Trump were once at least somewhat close. Though to be fair, back in the 90s and 2000s, Trump had connections everywhere because he wasn't a politician. Those connections basically fell apart when he won 2016. But Bloomberg is ultimately cut from the same cloth as Trump. He's not nearly as charismatic, his debate performance proved that, but he's a rich New York oligarch that wanted to get into politics. It's pretty much the same story. And I bet Bloomberg's thought process was, well, if Trump did it with the Republicans, surely I can do it with the Democrats, right? I mean, I've got more money. Like, way more money. Ridiculously more money, in fact. I gotta say, it's very strange for the Democratic Party to have even allowed this to happen at all. I mean, their base right now, their rhetoric is anti-billionaire, and yet here's somebody who's far richer than Trump. And in fact, his supporters kept repeating that Bloomberg was richer than Trump, as if this was some kind of own. I don't get it. I thought you guys were against wealth inequality, not neener, I'm richer than you. Though at the same time, considering that socialists often believe that the rich is just somebody richer than them, well, if you keep shifting those goalposts to their logical conclusion, I guess Bloomberg can be a leftist. So Bloomberg burned through a whole ton of money to try to get himself elected. Nearly $500 million, I think, by the end. That's a lot of money. But not for him. That's less than 1% of what Bloomberg's currently worth. And oh boy, were there ads for him everywhere. TV ads, radio ads, internet ads. If you were in a Super Tuesday state, you couldn't walk outside without tripping over Bloomberg's head somewhere. And yes, the rumors that he was paying off internet personalities to shill for him online, that was true too. YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. He put money into all of them. How many of you stumbled across an account like this while you were on social media recently? Like Henry IV Bloomberg. This account will be solely for campaigning for Mike Bloomberg. It's just some college student who needed money, I guess. Hey kid, can you make me some memes? Make me seem cool in the eyes of the other kids? Post that shit on Twitter, that'll get me some votes. Yeah, I'll pay for your college, don't worry about it. Of course, as it turned out, the quality and accuracy of all of this stuff was dubious at best. Mike Bloomberg's campaign has deleted a series of satirical tweets where they invented quotes from Bernie Sanders about a host of dictators. I guess they were banking on the fact that no one would be able to tell the truth considering Bernie's actual quotes about some dictators. But still, considering that those are probably $100,000 a tweet, that's a pretty big loss to delete them. However, he spent so much goddamn money and went up in the polls so much that the DNC actually, by their own rules, had to take him seriously? So when Mike Bloomberg asked for a delay to the next Democratic town hall, CNN listened to him. And yeah, did you guys watch that debate? It was brutal.
Are you willing to release all of those women from those non-disclosure agreements so we can hear their side of the story?
We have a very few non-disclosure agreements.
How many is
Let me
there?
finish.
How many is there?
None of them accuse me of doing anything other than maybe they didn't like the joke I told. Fortunately, I make a lot of money, and we do business all around the world, and we are preparing it. The number of pages will probably be in the thousands of pages. I can't go to TurboTax.
Mike found out the hard way that the one thing you can't really buy is charisma. The official Team Bloomberg account on Twitter decided to make a thread highlighting all the acts of vandalism against the various campaign offices around the country. And they kept ending each tweet with, "America deserves better." Like, the problem here is that these are inner city locations that are plagued by poverty and crime, and that this vandalism is happening by people breaking in because they're trying to find stuff to sell, I guess? I don't know. You know, the narrative people push to desperation. But really, this just looks like people don't like you, Mike. I'm sorry, dude. Probably the funniest one was the Bloomberg office in Flint. That's some very polite graffiti there, isn't it? They didn't spray paint the windows, they just put up some paper and then spray painted on the paper. Also, I do think it's probably worth pointing out that Flint's landmark problem has been its lack of drinking water for something like 3 or 4 years now. It's a problem that the city of Flint estimates will take about $55 million to fix. That is 10% of what Bloomberg wasted on this failed campaign. I have a feeling that if he actually just foot the bill for fixing up Flint, that would have gone a lot further than flooding ads everywhere that no one actually liked. Oh, there's also the fact that Bloomberg, back in 2014, backed Rick Snyder's campaign to the tune of $3 million. Governor Snyder would go on to preside over the Flint water crisis and mismanage it so badly that he bears personal significant legal responsibility for it. You bet on the wrong horse, Mike. What is it with all these wine moms acting like the Democratic primary is a literal trial by combat or something? I've never heard the crowd boo in any of these debates, not once. Suddenly they're booing anyone who goes after Bloomberg. Anyone who thinks this isn't sketchy has a baby brain. It is absolutely up Bloomberg's alley to buy off crowds. But get this take. Good. They must learn to leave Mike Bloomberg alone. Yep, very good, Karen. Thank you very much. About 20 more tweets like that and your mortgage will be paid off. And then there was this weird video. We call on Senator Sanders to condemn the hateful speech from his supporters and end the Trump-like rhetoric. America deserves better. Yeah, dude, even as this guy floods the internet using paid shills to spit out his nonsense, he's also crying about mean tweets, I guess. I will say, though, I do recognize a couple of shitlords in this video. Congratulations to everyone who made it into Bloomberg's meme reel. Also, Bloomberg believes that the astrological powers that be will hand him the win? What the hell?
You fellow Aquarians, I just want you to know that we are thoughtful, we are independent, and even keel. And it will not surprise you to know that our current president is not an Aquarian, he's a Gemini. I knew you wouldn't be surprised.
Rip that Gemini vote. Oh wait, I'm a Gemini. Of course, behind the stupidity there are more serious problems. Bloomberg definitely dug into Bernie for praising Fidel Castro, but at least Bernie did that some time ago. Bloomberg recently praised Chinese communism. The former New York mayor signaled that he intends to run in the unrepentant Stalinist lane of the Democratic primary. Bloomberg argued that the Chinese Communist Party was ecologically friendly, democratically accountable, and invulnerable to the threat of revolution. Bloomberg, the Communist Party wants to stay in power in China, and they listen to the public. When the public says, I can't breathe the air, Xi Jinping is not a dictator. He has to satisfy his constituents or he's not going to survive. He's not a dictator? No, he has a constituency to answer to. He doesn't have a vote. He doesn't have democracy. He's not held accountable by voters. If his advisors gave him, is the check on him just a revolution? You're not going to have a revolution. No government survives without the will of the majority of its people. I don't think Bloomberg understands how politics works. And there's also this. 64 different women have filed 40 lawsuits against Michael Bloomberg for sexual harassment and discrimination. In Bloomberg's 1997 autobiography, staffers found themselves uncomfortably reading their billionaire founder's boasts about keeping a girlfriend in every city and other womanizing exploits as a Wall Street up-and-comer. Here's a few fun quotes. I like theater, dining, and chasing women. I really want to have Jennifer Lopez. I mean, have dinner with her. A top aide said Bloomberg frequently remarked nice tits upon seeing attractive women. If women wanted to be appreciated for their brains, they'd go to the library instead of to Bloomingdale's. And of the computer terminal that made him a billionaire, it will do everything, including give you head. I guess that puts a lot of you girls out of business. This is of the same caliber as Trump's grab him by the pussy comments, but no one's really raising an uproar this time, are they? I guess stuff like sexual assault or objectification is completely fine to the establishment left as long as you have the right politics? It seems to be the same thing regarding Bloomberg's record on race. Here's the mayor who instituted stop and frisk, and yet the Democratic Party is just welcoming him with open arms. Oh no, wait, here's their defense. Democrats are condemning Bloomberg because 64 women have accused him of speaking nasty. Bloomberg employs 20,000 people. 64 people is 0.003%. Instead of praising the man for creating 20,000 jobs, let's berate him because 0.003% complained. With that attitude, we will re-elect Trump. Not only is this an incredible reach, but it is probably the worst case of Trump derangement syndrome I've ever seen. Trump is not Satan. It is certainly possible that there could be people running within the Democratic Party that are worse than Trump. And Bloomberg's probably one of them, sorry. Well, all this time, all this money spent, flooding ads everywhere, hiring people on social media, doing whatever it is that you can to buy an election. Where did it get Mike Bloomberg in the end? What has the past 3 months and $500 million really culminated in? Womp womp. Michael Bloomberg ends U.S. presidential campaign. He decided to endorse Biden, by the way. What the hell was the point of that? Mike, you could have literally just endorsed Biden. You didn't need to run around for 3 months and blow all this money on literally nothing. Everyone knew you weren't gonna go anywhere with this, man. Like, were you being taken on a ride by somebody? I don't get it. Did you have to launder 500 million really quick for some reason? The most interesting thing about the rise and fall of Mike Bloomberg is that it did actually expose how easy it would be for a billionaire oligarch to buy an election. Mike only spent 500 million. What if he decided to actually spend like 5 billion or something and start 6 months earlier so he was actually ready to go? Who knows? In that case, we might actually see a Bloomberg nomination. He threw so much money at the process that all of his flaws didn't matter, at least until he had to debate. In my opinion, the debate is what fundamentally killed him. And you know, with all that money, Bloomberg, you probably could have spent a little bit on debating lessons, come on. But what do we do next time? What do we do in 2024? What do we do when some rich jerk who's not actually interested in being a public servant decides to dump an entire fortune on an election and simply win it like that? I mean, we've been complaining now for over a decade about the danger of super PACs, on how elites can funnel near unlimited amounts of money into campaigns. But Bloomberg bypassed all that. He just ran himself. Of course, there is the alternative angle. People are screeching bloody murder at the fact that Bloomberg tried to buy an election, and fair enough. There's a lot wrong with that. But a lot of the Democratic establishment right now, they're doing the same thing. They're just not spending their own money. When a candidate promises the electorate free stuff, it can be healthcare, it can be schooling, student loans, housing, food, you name it. That stuff still has to be paid for. It still has to be produced by somebody, and they have to be compensated for their labor. So while Bloomberg's attempt to buy an election is unconscionable, there's also a very strong argument that any candidate running on a platform of, we will take stuff away from the rich, stuff that they earned, and by the way that you won't take away because they're just going to go to a different country, but we'll take it away from them and we'll give it to the rest of you. That's still fundamentally buying an election. It's just that the candidate's not using their own money to buy it. They're writing a giant IOU, one that will probably end up being worthless in the long run. Every system of government has its flaws. Democracy too, even though I think it's the best one. At one point, only landowners were allowed to vote. The claim nowadays is that that was racist. It meant that poor people or disenfranchised people could never actually have a say in the workings of the government, and their voice needs to be heard. And fair enough, I agree with that assessment. But the logic behind only landowners having a vote was because back at that time period, landowners had a disproportionate amount to lose from government policy. People who didn't own land back then, they wouldn't have to worry about, for example, what happens to their property during a war. What happens if it's reappropriated by the state? A simplistic example of this fear would be something like, okay, you have a guy who owns a parcel of land, and then suddenly 50 squatters show up and want to squat on that land. And because everyone can vote, the local county has an election, all the squatters vote for the candidate that will allow them to squat on the land, and suddenly the guy's property rights don't matter. It's a far-fetched example, but it's what they were trying to prevent. Later in history, it was decided that only men could vote and not women. Again, the argument against this was that it was fundamentally sexist, that women should have a say in how the nation's run because they live in it, they're citizens of it. And I also fundamentally agree. But I also understand the other side of the argument. If only men are getting drafted, if only men have to go to war, why should women have a vote in whether or not the nation goes to war? It's not them putting their lives in the line. In that way, the right to vote was tied to the obligation to serve in the military. But now we have a completely different problem. And no, I'm not advocating for removing the right to vote from everyone, I'm simply describing the problem that we have. We are in a situation where a sizable amount of the population is completely apolitical. They just don't care. They don't care about the left, the right, Republicans, Democrats, it doesn't matter. The best way to get those people to vote is to promise them something for nothing. It's to promise them a sale, a good deal, a buy one, get one free. The same thing that a lot of local stores do when they hand out flyers or announce deals or something. They say, hey, you come, you shop here? Well, we got all this stuff on sale. Here's all the reasons you should shop with us rather than our competitor. Because we have a large mass of people that are politically disengaged, that is fundamentally what politics has turned into. Vote for me, I'll give you an Obama phone. Vote for me, there's free healthcare. Vote for me, schooling. Vote for me, housing. The apolitical person won't actually care too much about the issues. They'll simply take whatever deal sounds good to them. And the apathy of the voter is a well-known major flaw of universal suffrage. It has been since long before I was born. And Michael Bloomberg's campaign represents that flaw taken to its logical extreme. He didn't even need to promise anything concrete. He just had to spend, spend, spend. Of course, what fixes this is not removing universal suffrage. It's encouraging a more engaged voting population. People who will actually think through the issues and consider what is the best course of action for the nation, and not simply voting because this guy promised me free shit that I want. Anyway, Bloomberg's a joke. I'm glad he's gone. I'll see you next time. I love you.
I'll tell you where I'm going.
Oh, beautiful, Michael.
First, Iowa, then New Hampshire. Maybe I can get the whole country to behave.